In 1945, during the last days of World War II, a Zero plane lands on Odo, the with the maintenance base for kamikaze aircraft. After the technicians do a detailed inspection, Tachibana informs the aviator Koichi that no problems were detected. Koichi instantly becomes defensive because it turns out he fabricated the malfunction to save his life. As he walks away to avoid Tachibana noticing his anxiety, another technician tells him that he wishes there were more warriors like him because the conflict is pretty much lost already. At that moment Koichi is stunned to see numerous dead fish in the water. Later that night, a siren starts wailing through the base. Usually it's a signal for air raids, but when the spotlight illuminates the area, they're stunned to see a huge monster called Godzilla emerging from the sea. Godzilla instantly brings down a guard tower and causes a blaze, so everyone dashes to find refuge in a trench. The men may be in the armed forces but they're only technicians, so Tachibana urges Koichi to use his aircraft's weapons against Godzilla. Koichi sprints to his aircraft but when he sees Godzilla up close, he freezes in terror. The technicians panic and open fire on Godzilla themselves, enraging him and causing him to viciously start wrecking the trenches and killing people by throwing them away, stepping on them, hitting them with his tail, or even devouring them. As the technicians run around and Godzilla wrecks the base, Koichi becomes petrified and bolts out of the aircraft right before Godzilla lifts it up too. Then the beast hurls the aircraft and the resulting blast knocks Koichi out. The next morning, Koichi awakens to find only one other survivor, Tachibana, who is gathering the bodies for proper burial. Tachibana is enraged and shouts at Koichi for failing to act. Sometime later, Japan ultimately surrenders and a vessel comes by to pick up all the surviving soldiers and take them home. Without saying a word, Tachibana gives Koichi the photographs he found with the deceased men. By December, Koichi returns to his neighborhood in Tokyo and finds it in ruins. His own home is nothing but debris. Koichi starts experiencing survivor's guilt and wonders if he could have done something. His neighbor Sumiko sees him and recalls he was supposed to be a kamikaze pilot, so she yells at him for his cowardice. She's lost all of her children to the American bombings and tells him that his parents are dead as well. Devastated, Koichi recalls his parents' letters in which they told him to return alive and wonders what is truly the right answer to this dilemma. Some days later, Koichi has constructed a makeshift shelter from the debris. While he's visiting the black market, a woman pursued by several men for stealing blankets runs by and leaves a baby in his arms. Koichi considers leaving the baby in the market, but he can't do it and decides to take her with him while searching for the woman. He soon finds her nearby. Her name is Noriko and she's been waiting for him so she could take baby Okako back. Then Noriko follows Koichi home and asks him to share some food with her and the baby. She explains that she isn't married and the baby isn't even hers, she adopted her from a dying mother during the Tokyo air raids. Like Koichi, her own family is gone. Koichi wants them to leave after dinner, but while they converse they fall asleep and they end up spending the night. The next day, Sumiko scolds Koichi for taking in Noriko and Okako, saying it's too late to play the hero. However, she changes her mind when she learns Noriko is not the child's mother. She starts helping them care for Okako and even gives them a sack of rice so the baby can be properly fed. In March 1946, Koichi returns home and announces he's found a well-paying job detonating unexploded mines in the waters around Japan. Noriko thinks it's too risky but Koichi points out this is the only way to avoid starving to death. He also explains the boats are supposed to be specially designed to evade mines. However, when he makes it to the pier, Koichi is stunned to discover he'll be serving on the Shinsamaru, a small wooden vessel. Former Navy scientist Kenji explains that they use wood to counteract American magnetic mines. He also meets Captain Seiji and Shiro, who is too young to have served in the conflict. As they head out on the water, Seiji explains their task. A cable suspended between Shinsamaru and another boat called Kishimaru allows them to clip mine wires and bring them to the surface, where they can be detonated from a distance with machine gun fire. Koichi tries the machine gun and proves to be an excellent marksman, thanks to his pilot experience, so that becomes his role on the vessel. Shiro wishes the war had lasted longer so he could fight too, and Koichi immediately scolds him for such an awful thought. That night, Koichi is sleeping when suddenly he hears shouting. He comes out and sees the technicians from the island being stepped on by Godzilla again. But at that moment he wakes up and realizes it was a nightmare. The survivor's guilt takes over again and he clings to Noriko as he wonders if he's actually dead and everything that happened since the island has been a dream. Frightened, Noriko pushes him off and Koichi has a breakdown as he stares at the photos of the dead technicians and their families. In July 1946, an American nuclear test at Bikini Atoll causes a massive explosion in the sea as part of Operation Crossroads. Godzilla is underwater when it happens and causes him to mutate. Meanwhile, things are improving for Koichi. He continues to work with the minesweeping team while Noriko raises Okako at home. Koichi is soon able to afford a motorcycle and significant renovations to their house, and all the neighbors are rebuilding as well, gradually making a proper neighborhood out of the area again. One night when Koichi's crewmates visit for dinner, Kenji takes some nice photos of everyone. The men assume Noriko is Koichi's wife and are surprised to learn of their living arrangement. When Okako calls Koichi her father, he tells her not to do that, which worries the others even more. They encourage him to accept that he's found a family, but Koichi sticks to his denial. In March 1947, Noriko takes a desk job in Ginza, a thriving district in Tokyo. She explains to Koichi that she wants to be able to support herself and to be out of his way so he can find a wife. She also shares that Sumiko has already happily offered to take care of Akako while they're both at work. Meanwhile, the US government is concealing the fact that several of their military ships have been destroyed by an unknown adversary. There are pictures of a strange object in the water, confirming it was Godzilla. Whenever a vessel is destroyed, radioactive signals are detected. Radars start tracking Godzilla's path and confirm he'll be reaching Japan in a few weeks. However, the US refuses to intervene because it could damage relations with the Soviet Union. By May 1947, the Shinshimaru and Kishinmaru are sent on a special mission to the Ogasawara Islands and find a massive American ship that has been utterly destroyed. As the crew discusses what could have caused such destruction, Koichi sees dead fish in the water and tells the others about Godzilla. Shiro is horrified that the Japanese government expects them to battle Godzilla in their tiny boats, but Kenji explains that their task is simply to delay his advance until a cruiser arrives. Their orders state they must use the mines they recover as weapons and keep the mission secret. After they collect 2 mines, Koichi notices there are far more dead fish than last time and rings the alarm. He asks Seiji to send the boats back because they can't fight like this, but Seiji is determined not to let Tokyo be destroyed again. At that moment, Godzilla surges out of the water and brings down Kishinmaru in an instant, so a terrified Seiji changes his mind. The Shinshimaru sails away as fast as possible and Godzilla chases after them, so the crew drop mines in the water. However, the blast doesn't even scratch such a creature. Next, Koichi opens fire with a machine gun, but bullets don't do anything either. Since it appears the monster's skin is tough, Kenji gets the notion to target the mouth instead. They release the second mine but the detonator doesn't function, so Koichi returns to the machine gun and triggers the mine explosion when it's near Godzilla's face. The explosion damages Godzilla's left eye and a large portion of his cheek, but it also creates a wave that rocks the boat, injuring Koichi and Shiro. Unfortunately, Godzilla's injuries swiftly heal and he angrily emerges from the water as he roars, ready for retaliation. Suddenly the battle cruiser arrives and fires at Godzilla, who directs his fury towards it, savagely tearing it apart with his claws. The cruiser keeps firing at the creature, causing it to topple backward into the ocean. However, Godzilla begins to emit light as he swims beneath the cruiser and obliterates it instantly with an explosive heat beam. Then Godzilla roars and continues advancing toward Tokyo. Eventually, Koichi wakes up in a hospital and is welcomed by his crew. He wants to inform the locals, but Kenji informs him the government is still concealing the truth. Upon returning home, Noriko is upset because Koichi refuses to answer her inquiries, so he finally relents and reveals everything, displaying the photographs. Due to his guilt, he believes he shouldn't have survived, so Noriko reassures him that everyone who made it through the war was destined to live, which were her parents' final words to her. The following day, the Tokyo Bay defense spots Godzilla approaching and receives authorization to detonate their mine blockade. However, the blasts have no impact on Godzilla. Soon, an evacuation is announced in Ginza, and Koichi is concerned about Noriko upon hearing the news on the radio. Shortly after, the creature reaches the city and commences demolishing the area, hurling a train carriage that halts Noriko's train on its tracks. Panic ensues as everyone flees through the streets while Godzilla advances and clamps down on the train, causing it to fracture. Numerous individuals plummet to their demise, and initially, Noriko holds on, but as soon as she spots water, she leaps to safety. Godzilla continues his ferocious onslaught, demolishing the cherished Nippon Theater and claiming the lives of several journalists broadcasting from a rooftop. Noriko reaches the road and gets jostled by the crowd, but Koichi arrives just in time to whisk her away. As everyone flees and more structures are demolished, the tanks finally arrive and open fire, but once again bullets achieve nothing. Suddenly Godzilla's fins start to illuminate and enlarge before Godzilla opens his mouth and unleashes an atomic heat beam that strikes the tanks, triggering a nuclear explosion that devastates most of the area. Seeing the shockwave approaching, Noriko shoves Koichi aside and gets fatally injured instead. Koichi collapses in anguish and screams as a dark rain begins to fall, and Godzilla calmly retreats to the sea. Subsequently, news reports reveal that 30,000 civilians were killed or wounded, and 20,000 buildings were razed. The area of Godzilla's rampage is sealed off due to the elevated radiation levels. Koichi's crew assists him in organizing a memorial ceremony for Noriko, but Koichi is too despondent to take action. Akako soon begins sobbing as she requests her mother, and Koichi gazes at the mechanic's photographs, believing he's being penalized for his cowardice. Kenji informs him that a coalition of civilians is devising a strategy to eradicate Godzilla and invites him to the gathering. Later, Koichi attends the assembly with Shiro, Seiji, and numerous former naval servicemen. A commander explains that Japan has arranged for the return of 4 destroyers, but unfortunately they will be stripped of their armaments. Kenji then presents his proposal. They should lower Godzilla into the deepest part of Sugami Bay and attach canisters of Freon gas to him. This would reduce the water's buoyancy and forcefully submerge Godzilla to a depth of 1,500 meters, crushing him with a sudden change in pressure. Koichi inquires if this will eliminate Godzilla without fail, but Kenji cannot assure it, so Koichi attempts to depart. However, Kenji discloses he has an alternative strategy. Enormous balloons would be inflated beneath Godzilla to swiftly raise him to the surface and obliterate him through explosive decompression. Following a demonstration in the yard, some individuals remain unconvinced and simply depart. However, most of the group remains and consents to collaborate to safeguard their nation. The Shin Simaru's crew goes out for beverages, and Kenji mentions that Godzilla likely regards Tokyo as part of his domain. To entice the creature to the designated trap location, he intends to utilize acoustic minesweepers to broadcast recordings of his roar. He acknowledges that his plan could fail in numerous ways, so Koichi offers to assist with the luring operation if they can procure him a fighter aircraft. Seiji questions if Koichi has a death wish and reprimands him for not marrying Noriko, noting she would have been at home as a homemaker instead of in Ginza where she perished. Koichi explains that he desired to, but his conflict isn't over. The following day, Kenji invites Koichi to a hangar where he's obtained an anti-bomber fighter. Years in storage have rendered the aircraft inoperative and will necessitate a top mechanic to restore it. Koichi wishes for Tachibana to fill that role, but upon checking the records, there's no current address. Determined to atone for his errors, Koichi refuses to consider another mechanic and initiates correspondence with a plan in mind. One evening, Koichi is attacked by someone unexpectedly and rendered unconscious. Moments later, Koichi awakens and discovers his assailant was Tachibana, who is enraged about the letters. It appears Koichi dispatched correspondence to the comrades from Tachibana's assignments blaming him for the events on Odo Island because he knew Tachibana wouldn't respond to pleading and would only come if he was enraged. Initially, Tachibana declines to assist, but Koichi changes his mind by divulging his concept. Since the mine caused damage to Godzilla's face, he proposes to pilot the aircraft loaded with explosives directly into the creature's mouth. Over the next few days, everyone toils diligently to prepare for their assault. One evening, radiation detecting buoys indicate that Godzilla will arrive in less than a day. Kenji shares their route on a map and instructs the volunteers to spend the night with their families. Following the gathering, Kenji and Seiji inform Shiro, who is still injured, that he'll be remaining home tomorrow. When he objects, Seiji informs him that never experiencing combat should be a source of pride. Meanwhile, Tachibana examines the cockpit more closely and gets an inspiration. At home, Akako presents Koichi with a drawing she created of them and Noriko and starts to weep. When the day arrives, Koichi leaves a letter beside Akako while she sleeps before slipping away. Later, Akako brings the letter to Sumiko, who discovers a stack of money and a message requesting her to look after Akako. At that instant, she also receives a telegram with astonishing news. At the hangar, Tachibana elucidates that he swapped out some of the plane's non-essential parts with 2 bombs. Seated in the cockpit, Koichi realizes that a part of him desires to survive, and Tachibana reminds him that the mechanics on Odo Island also yearn for survival. Koichi retrieves the mechanic's photographs as a reminder of what he must safeguard. Hakabana then presents him with the bomb safety pin and an additional item. Soon, the buoys detect Godzilla is nearing, and the alarms sound in Tsugami Bay. Abruptly, a vessel ablaze crashes onto the port, signaling that Godzilla has reached the shore quicker than expected. While Koichi places Noriko's photograph in the cockpit and takes off, Godzilla arrives at the port, but Kenji instructs everyone to proceed with the plan regardless and places his faith in Koichi. As the vessels depart as well, the aircraft approaches Godzilla, and Koichi opens fire to keep him occupied while executing some daring maneuvers to evade being struck. Godzilla takes the bait and pursues the aircraft into the sea, where 2 unmanned vessels are awaiting. Godzilla blasts them with his atomic breath, which injures his own body as well and generates a wave that jolts the crewed ships. It will require several minutes for him to regenerate, so the team can proceed with the plan. 2 destroyers encircle Godzilla and secure a cable connected to gas canisters around him while Koichi continues to divert his attention. The vessels graze against each other as they complete the circle, but no one sustains injuries. As Godzilla prepares to unleash another attack, the canisters are ruptured, forcefully dragging him underwater. Once he surpasses the designated depth, Godzilla becomes motionless and ceases charging his atomic breath, but unfortunately, he remains alive. Kenji then orders the balloons inflated beneath Godzilla to resurface him, however Godzilla swiftly obliterates them to thwart their efforts. The vessels attempt hauling him the remainder of the distance themselves, but the creature's mass is too immense and one of the cranes collapses. At that instance, a fleet of tugboats led by Shiro arrives to assist. Everybody pulls together and before long Godzilla resurfaces, appearing heavily injured due to the decompression yet still alive. Godzilla begins charging again and the team believes it's finally concluded. Unexpectedly, Koichi's aircraft flies directly into Godzilla's mouth and detonates the explosives, ultimately bringing Godzilla down. Following a moment of silence, the team observes Koichi descending with a parachute. It transpires Tachibana urged him to survive and the additional item had been an ejector. Once the smoke dissipates, they witness that the top of Godzilla's head has been obliterated and the atomic force causes the remainder of his body to crumble. Every individual on the vessel salutes as the conflict ultimately concludes. Upon their return to the shore, The locals greet them with appreciation and enthusiasm, and Sumiko hurries to present Koichi with the telegram. Moments later, Koichi and Akako hurry to a hospital and discover Noriko is wounded but still breathing. She inquires if Koichi's conflict is finally over and he enfolds her in tears, oblivious to a pattern resembling Godzilla's dorsal fins on her neck. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the sea, a fragment of Godzilla's tissue initiates regeneration.